It's interesting to compare a franchise as legendary as Star Wars at one of its highest points, like when the prequels were coming out, when there was the idea that, hey, George Lucas is going to be coming back. Here we are, hot off the heels of the release of the special editions in theaters in 1997, the 20th anniversary, and then, hey, a couple years later, he's going to be doing some prequels, and the hype was insane. I was only 9 years old at the time, 8 and 9 years old when the marketing was running wild, and it was everywhere. As somebody who self-admittedly is not the biggest Star Wars fan, but does understand and recognize the cultural relevance, that stuff was everywhere, man. You could not escape it. Video games, television spots, merchandise aplenty. It was everywhere, and here we are 25 years after the fact. And think of the film what you will. Ultimately, a lot of people perceive it to be the weakest in the prequel and overall in the Star Wars, George Lucas Star Wars. I should go ahead and correct myself. That canon, the only Star Wars for a lot of people, and to be completely honest, it's a sentiment that I would echo as well. The fact that even if you don't have the most positive opinion of the Phantom Menace, you at least have an opinion on it. You at least can cite some memorable characters. Darth Maul, young Anakin, Padme Amidala, the key to it all, Jar Jar Binks, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn. Like, people know those characters. 25 years later, it has had a cultural impact. And I want to go ahead and fast forward a little bit to the current day. And I talked about this a little bit before with the George Lucas Cannes interview. Where here we are, a decade removed, a decade plus of Disney owning Star Wars after George sold it to him. For one, not having recouped the purchase price, and B, I went from 1 to B, very good. Yeah, and number 2, putting out more content than George did during his entire ownership of the franchise, and not having anywhere near the number of memorable characters, moments, unironic characters and moments that have created any sort of lasting cultural impact. Because, okay, since Disney bought the franchise, from 2015 to 2019, they released 5 films that nobody can really remember. Normies don't cite it all. Nobody knows who Rey is. They just think that Rey's that guy that works out in the shop. They think Poe is a pastry and Finn is something on the back of their boat. They have no reference at all to any of the major characters of the sequel trilogy. Rogue One, don't make me laugh. Solo was the first film to lose money. The only thing that gets cited from Disney is the desecration of the legacy characters that made Star Wars a brand worth having to begin with. Which is why it's so funny, right? Because you had Disney when they purchased it thinking that they were going to be doing the big thing. They were going to be super clever on this. And that was reinforced with the first piece of spoken dialogue in The Force Awakens. This will begin to make things right. We're going to go ahead and jettison all of those cringe prequels. Everything that George did after the original trilogy wasn't real Star Wars. Disney would be able to craft real Star Wars. And here we are, them having to put The Phantom Menace back in theaters, and it probably end up being the most profitable film for them this year. The most profitable Star Wars related release this year, because what else is the competition? A couple of animated shows that nobody remembers. Skeleton Crew, The Bad Batch is just wrapped up and nobody cares. I think, Tales or Legends of the Jedi, which even the Star Wars Theory hated so much he had to do an entire takedown video of. Like, brother, that's all trash. And then, their live action Acolyte. Is everybody excited for that? We're not even a week away. We're just a couple of days away from that being dropped on us like a plague. But we've gotten it all wrong over this past decade. Okay, it isn't uninteresting stories. It isn't poor shepherding of the IP. It's just simply too many bigots that are out there. Kathleen Kennedy, quite possibly the worst boss in Hollywood history, says a lot of women in Star Wars struggle with fan attacks because the fan base is so male-dominated. Here's the thing, man. Disney, Kathleen Kennedy, has probably driven off more female Star Wars fans with their output than they have created. Okay, back when Star Wars was Star Wars, when George Lucas was at the helm, yes, it was an overwhelmingly male fan base. It still is. Unless you take a look at social media, then it's just kind of this amorphous blob of genderless, creepy-looking people that just stan their favorite character of the week. I'm sure they're going to do exactly the same with May or Oslo, or whatever the name of any of the, whatever Trinity is going to be called, and the Acolyte. But women liked Star Wars because Star Wars was a universal language, telling archetypal stories that would resonate with everybody. Star Wars didn't have to have specific representation to check boxes in order for it to be an iconic brand. George, Lawrence Kasdan, Marsha Lucas, everybody in between with those original 6 movies did something special that made it the biggest cinematic franchise in history. But now we're just focusing in on just toxic male fans. All right then, Kathy, what do you got for us? In a new interview with the New York Times, for the upcoming Star Wars series, The Acolyte, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy said she is aware that women in the space franchise are often attacked online more than men. Can you cite a single instance of that? Or are you just looking at your undeserving showrunners like Leslye Headland, whose biggest accomplishment is feeding women to Harvey Weinstein? Or Deborah Cho, who was the showrunner for the most abysmal, canon-breaking, slap-in-the-face series that was the Obi-Wan Kenobi show? Or, do you want to talk about female attacks, like how you fired Gina Carano? Is that the one that you're talking about? Oh, okay. Because the fan base is so male-dominated. Why does that inherently create for a aggressive space? Because in my experience with the franchise, people who are fans of Star Wars are eager to talk about Star Wars with anybody who wants to talk about Star Wars, Then again, I'm not some out-of-touch executive who has been described as an ice-cold bitch who has presided over more failures than Planned Parenthood. But we should just let her talk about this, right? Okay. Female stars Daisy Ridley, who has never had a bad thing to say outside of a couple of choice words about how Rey's a Mary Sue, and Kelly Marie Tran certainly faced online harassment. Well, Kelly Marie Tran, it's been alleged that she faced harassment, couldn't provide any receipts. And like I said about Daisy Ridley, she's actually probably done better for herself in recent interviews, even though her movies are absolute crap, in saying that fans are just kind of passionate. But okay. The Acolyte is already being attacked in certain corners of the fandom. Yeah, because it looks like garbage, brah. Acolyte is an original story created by Leslye Headland. Where's the reference to Harvey? That's set long before the events of the Phantom Menace. 100 years is not really long before the Phantom Menace, but it's enough where they're going to go ahead and, try to pilfer the prequels for as many member berries as possible. Headland, known for directing films, though she's known for something, directing something, such as Sleeping with Other People and co-creating Netflix's comedy series Russian Doll. What's any of that? Is the first woman to serve as a showrunner of a Star Wars series. It's so nice that Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, is going to talk about the first female showrunner of Star Wars, when I just recently mentioned that the first series in Obi-Wan Kenobi was exclusively directed by Deborah Chow. But okay, cool, this is different somehow. I guess probably the first gay female director, right? Her show includes major female Star Wars characters played by Amanda Stenberg. Well, she plays 2 of them. Spoilers: Carrie-Anne Moss, High Trinity, and Jodie Turner-Smith. Oh, her wife? Yeah, a little nepotism at play here, right? As reported by the Times. A loud primordial part. of the Star Wars. Okay, so basically calling you chuds. Cool stuff, bro. This has always worked. Has pushed back in predictable fashion against the show. Why there's so many women, girls, and minority characters increasingly dominating the ranks of the Jedi, reads a comment on the Acolyte trailer, with others expressing a similar worldview. Some trolls have nicknamed Headland's series the Wokeolite. Now, the Crapolite, I've seen that one circulated a little bit more, especially if you just do some certain things to the posters that they released. But you watch any of those trailers, you'd be hard-pressed to find, anybody who's actually representative of the Star Wars fan base in any of them. See a couple of creepy aliens, which is hilarious. One of the first lines of dialogue is "close their eyes," and the alien literally can't close his eyes. Is he supposed to just put his floopy hands over his eyes? All right then. But yeah, a lot of women and a lot of minorities. I mean, it's either A, highlighting how inept the High Republic is, because, you go ahead a couple of decades and then, wow, there's a really strong comeback for Whitey. My belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. Kathleen Kennedy told the publication about her support of Headland's Acolyte. That's fantastic. That's an easy decision for me. And that drives everything at Lucasfilm. You want to know why shit sucks? My belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. Look at who it represents. Look at who's at the forefront of every single stupid-ass Kathleen Kennedy-sanctioned Star Wars project. A woman. A bland female protagonist. Rey in the movies. Jyn Erso in Rogue One. Solo was simping over Daenerys Targaryen. Obi-Wan was all about Reva. Mandalorian, he's getting sidelined for Bo-Katan. And the Acolyte, well, it's just all women anyways. Yeah, it needs to be representative of everyone. That's an easy decision for me. You know what storytelling should be about? It should be about telling a story with likable, relatable characters, not just boxes to be ticked. But this is why Star Wars is in the state that it's in, because Leslye Headland, oh my god, operating with these giant franchises now, with social media and a level of expectation, it's terrifying, Kennedy continued. But yeah, of course, it would be terrifying. Looking at your track record, people are starting to connect the dots, do a little bit of pattern recognition and going, wow, Kathy, you suck at your job. How do you continue to have it? I think Leslye has struggled with it a bit. I think a lot of the women who step into Star Wars struggle with this a bit more. Well, I mean when you make such divisive statements off rip as the Force is female, and then you have the audacity to come out and say you need to have proper representation in your films. Why do you think you're getting quote-unquote backlash, but you can't cite anything? Because of the fan base being so male-dominated, they sometimes get attacked in ways that can be quite personal. Unfrickin' believable. But this is why, okay, interviews like this, track records like Kathleen Kennedy's, nobody has any hope for the Acolyte. They look at those uninspired trailers and go, wow, I'm really excited for the Floopy lightsaber whip. That's going to be super cool. It's a dead franchise walking. Franchise that now has to pilfer the content that they tried to distance themselves from so many moons ago, because them trying to replace all of your legendary characters with actresses that have a moon-shaped face didn't end up working out all that well for you. And now, because you're so creatively bankrupt and because George has no other source material for you to pilfer, now you're just doing exactly what a dying brand does. It lashes out to anybody that is still on the periphery of interest by saying that you're the problem. It's not us. It's all you. Well, best of luck with the Acolyte. I'm sure a lot of reviewers are going to be watching, but as for normies, they tuned out a long time ago. There's a reason Star Wars hasn't made a return to the cinema since 2019. They're scared. They're scared more about the box office flop that is on the horizon than of those toxic Star Wars fans online putting quote-unquote hate out there for all of the women to see. Star Wars fans' demands aren't very much, man. They just want good stories being told, not boxes to be checked or boxes to be filled. But then again, are we talking about Star Wars or Leslye Headland's weekend? So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.